Hello, my name is Professor Tammy Brown, and I teach at Miami University of Ohio. I'm in the Department of Global and Intercultural Studies. I'm also jointly appointed in History and Black World Studies. I am so pleased to join you by way of video for this symposium on art, education, and tourism. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Marcia Pierce. Thank you so much for agreeing to collaborate with me and my colleague, Dana Hughes-Moorhead, on this important discussion. I also would like to thank our other panelists, Wendell and Maria. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to have this discussion. Also, the Department of Creative and Festival Arts, thank you for your support. Thank you to all of you in attendance right now, faculty, students, general public. Thank you for coming. So, my contribution to this discussion is part academic and part autobiographical, so somewhat personal. My field of expertise is art as activism. So one of my favorite case studies is the woman that you see on the screen, Pearl Primus. Pearl Primus was born in Trinidad, and she immigrated with her family to New York at the age of 3 in the 1920s. She was a daughter of the Harlem Renaissance, so she was influenced by a lot of the major singers, dancers, composers, poets, Langston Hughes included, during the Harlem Renaissance. I use her as a case in point to talk about artist activism because she was not only a dancer and choreographer, but she also was an anthropologist, first self-taught, and then later she earned her PhD from New York University. And she also was an educator. She went into K through 12 schools in New York and taught children the moves of various West African cultures. And she was very specific to talk about what the dances mean and in which cultural contexts and cultural celebrations, from weddings to funerals, these dances would be applied. And in her opinion, dance served as a cultural ambassador. So it was a way to promote cultural awareness, not only tolerance, but appreciation. Now that I've shared with you some details about my scholarship and my academic studies, my research and writing, I want to share with you some details about my own love for travel and why I was inspired to do this symposium, to collaborate with Dr. Pierce and the other panelists. First of all, I come from a family that's very Afrocentric, that's very pro-Black. I would say my mother, who grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, grew up during the 1960s and was greatly influenced by the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Power movement. And my father is a minister. He is the founder of a church in Cincinnati, Ohio called Abundant Life Faith Fellowship. As a child, I saw my father travel to various countries in Africa and in India to preach, to reach out. He had friends in actually Rwanda. He went to Rwanda before the genocide. He has friends in Zimbabwe, friends in South Africa. He also had friends in India. And I think seeing my dad travel and also studying history on my own, studying African American history, African history, Caribbean history on my own piqued my interest in travel. And I did an around the world trip. So I went around the world in 84 days and I saw 9 different countries. So I started in Europe and I went to France, I went to Italy, I went to Spain. Then I went to Western Africa. I was in Senegal and Ghana. Then I went to Kenya. Then I went to India. Then I went to Australia, Japan, Hawaii, and then back home. During the Around the World trip, I conducted some more somewhat informal research. I did video interviews with people, various ages, various ethnic groups in each locale, men, women, children, asking them what they thought about Americans in general, perceptions of America, perceptions of Americans in world view, and what they thought of African Americans. And that footage, I am hoping to complete a documentary film by working with students, a future class that would then take my footage from the year 2000 and compare and contrast it with ideas based on their own interviews conducted with partners around the world, classmates, university partners around the world, to compare and contrast how America and worldview has changed. And I like the idea of doing 2000, a pre-Obama America, and then a post-Obama America now. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the ideas, some of the major responses, that Americans are arrogant, or Americans are entitled or loud or rude or pushy. Unfortunately, with the current person who's in the White House, I don't even say his name, I call him 45. With the current 45th president of the United States, he's reinforcing a lot of those negative stereotypes, unfortunately. So if I can get that documentary film done with a group of students, I think it would be perfect timing. Now, I would like to share with you some information on my first book. Pearl Primus is one chapter among 7 different Caribbean American intellectuals whom I wrote about in my first book, City of Islands. Why do I emphasize Primus' interests in history and her understanding of culture as a means of educating? I emphasize that because I think let's take for example, my college students at my University of Ohio. I want any of my students who go on spring break to the Caribbean to know it's not just about, splashing in the ocean and enjoying the sand. I want them to better understand the history, the culture, the people before they go. So in my class called Introduction to Black World Studies, we use a number of these case studies of Caribbean immigrants to better understand the history and culture of Trinidad, Barbados, Jamaica, to name a few locales. I'll conclude my discussion on cultivating the ability to be an engaged intellectual traveler by talking about my experience in Lilongwe, Malawi in summer 2015. I was invited to give a keynote address at an international conference on artist activism. I was excited to participate in the conference, and I stayed a full month to learn more about the culture and to take the time to work on my current book project. During my time, I took a lot of photographs. I noticed that there was a burgeoning women's movement in the country, and more women were becoming outspoken and even winning political office positions. I also noticed just in everyday life, women carrying huge loads on their heads. They might be balancing just a huge bowl of fruit, or sometimes a pail of water, or sometimes even a suitcase or sugar cane. I use these images to then talk about them as metaphors for the balancing acts that women do in their real lives, working to make money for the family, raising kids, and just holding their communities together. When I present this work, this is an unfinished project, but when I present it to give it more depth and to make sure that I am not just a tourist looking and observing, but that I am understanding the context, I will include interviews that I conduct with local women, everyone from a woman at the market selling fabric to a current day politician. Last but not least, I'd like to encourage all of you in attendance right now to be an engaged tourist wherever you travel, wherever you go, especially if you come to the United States. This is the challenge. Do not accept stereotypes of any cultural group that you see on television or film or video or in music as truth. But wherever you visit, meet people of diverse backgrounds, ages, ethnic backgrounds, meet people in the city, meet people if you can visit the countryside. The United States is so large that even though I was born and raised in the United States, a lot of times when I visit family and friends in other cities, I feel like I'm in another country. I was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio, the Midwest. It is a very calm, peaceful place, still has a lot of greenery, a lot of open fields, a lot of farms, but it also has city life too. I'm currently filming this in New York City, in Harlem. I am on a research trip For my current book project, a biography of rock and roll musician Jimi Hendrix, every time I walk out my door in New York, I feel like I'm in a different world. When I visit my sister in Houston, Texas, and Houston is a city that has so much diversity in terms of Mexican American, white, black, Asian, etc. It's an international city, a bustling city, great music, great food. Those are the highlights. Of course, the United States has its problems, right? And I'm saying all of this to say, wherever you visit, wherever you go, keep your eyes wide open, your ears open, to hear, to learn, to see, but to better understand the history and the culture behind the place and the people where you're visiting. And thank you in advance. I look forward to your questions.